Hello, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Leanne, I think you need to mute your Teams.
You hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. So, hi, my name is Richard Curtin and I'm the officer for the Dublin region with Clean Coast. I'd like to welcome everyone here as part of our Valentine's Day Break Up with Plastic initiative. So we're just going to have a quick chat about basically the impacts of plastics and how you yourself can kind of show a bit of love to our marine environment and some actions you can take. So my colleague Leanne Costello is on the call as well. So hi Leanne, do you want a quick introduction to yourself?
Richard, yes, and happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I am Leanne, I work with Clean Coast. I work specifically on a campaign called Think Before You Flush. So this campaign is run with Clean Coast in partnership with Irish Water, with super simple messages just about what we should and shouldn't flush down the toilet and the environmental impact of flushing the incorrect items down the toilet. So as we go, I'll throw in a couple of things about the campaign and around things that we can change in the bathroom and also some of the stuff about plastics.
Perfect. Thanks, Leanne. And my role is I basically kind of work closely with community groups and get them to adopt and protect our coastline, and mainly in the Dublin region. So we come at it from two different angles. But yeah, straight into the topic we're discussing today, which is plastics. So it's so interesting, I find, Leanne, that I was looking up a bit of research on the particular topic, and plastics was first created back in the 19th century, and it was actually out of a competition to find a replacement for ivory tusks in pianos. So at the time, there was unfortunately the population of elephants was going extinct due to the use of tusks in so many kind of our everyday items and that. And it's so interesting that back then, like at the time, it had a positive impact on biodiversity and our environment, because it led that these species weren't being used for these particular items. But now we fast forward a century and a half later, and it's our use of it that is having a big negative impact on the environment. So I'd like to put you in there about some of the kind of societal impacts, or how society has interacted with plastic over the nearly century and a half and that.
Yeah, so as Richard said there, plastic, when it came about first, was something very beneficial to the environment. It was kind of limiting the use of finite resources that we really needed to protect. And when a kind of big boom in production in the 1950s, people thought it was this absolute miracle, which it kind of is. It's super long lasting, it's very durable, and it's helped us do a huge amount of things. Like, just for example, I'm talking to you on a phone, and that's made up of plastic. The stand I have my phone on is made up of plastics. The computer I use every day in work is made up of some parts of plastics. And so we do rely on it, and it has helped humans a huge amount, whether it's medical or food packaging. It's been very beneficial in a lot of ways. Our issue really at the moment is where we're going towards, which is a big consumption of products, and those products are just single use, so they end up getting thrown away immediately. So yeah, it's really about kind of, I suppose, we're on Valentine's Day and we're talking about breaking up with plastics, but it's more so that we're breaking up with our toxic relationship with plastic. So that idea of, I only use one thing once and then throw it away. Instead, can we move towards more of a reusable, think products? Do we have to have excess plastic on things? And as us as consumers, making that decision and making choices that would mean that these products, which are great for, as I said, the long life of them and the durability, or can we make a decision that we end up taking advantage of that long life in our own lives, instead of putting it back into the environment where it's starting to break down, and it causes a huge amount of damage, really.
Yeah. Sorry. Go on, sorry, Leanne. I thought you were...
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that the plastics just, are so great, but they're so long lasting. In our own lives, we can use them much longer, but once we kind of dispose of them, it takes so long for them to break down, and it is ending up in our environment in a huge amount, really. And like Richard especially being a clean coast development officer, you're out on the beaches with volunteer groups and you're seeing a lot of this washing up on the shore.
Yeah, definitely, Leanne. Like it's so interesting when you look at the kind of the sources of plastics and that. So like about 80 are plastics or marine plastics and marine litter. About 80% of it comes from kind of like land-based activities. So this is everything from recreational. So, you know, when you're walking on the beach, you see kind of like plastic items like bottles and that are turning up there, and like wrappers. But then in our cities as well. So majority of our city, nearly all of our cities are either close to the coast or connected on some sort of rivers, our major ones. So obviously they're a big source of marine litter and plastic items ended up in our environment, but also the mismanagement of waste. So this is a big issue in the global south. So, you know, the way like our Western kind of consumption of plastic has kind of progressed into the global south, and what's happening there is they don't have the infrastructure in place to actually deal with these large quantities of plastic. So that's the mismanagement is what's happening, and we have this kind of term called kind of plastic leakage. And then obviously there is other kind of areas as well. There's sewage related litter, which I'll pull you into chat about in a second, Leanne. And there's also the fishing industry and transport. So you can see it comes from numerous different sources, but the majority is coming from land-based activities. So, and when you look at like marine litter as well, like you can't separate marine litter from plastics, because up to 70% is actually made from plastics. So that shows you like the quantity that is there. And like if you ever take a walk on the beach, you know, no matter where you are, like you'll come across kind of like, depends on globally, you will come across some kind of like plastic items like bottles or even fishing litter and that. And but like what they estimated is only 15% of the actual issues actually along our coastline. The other 15% would be up in the particular water column, but the majority, the 70%, is actually on the seabed. And like it's when we get these kind of storm surges, we get this thing called like retro rubbish kind of pops up on our coastline. So like you might get like a Quinsworth kind of like a washing up liquid container, or a Coke can from the 1970s. So that's what's it's so interesting when we get those storm surges. We see the longevity of this particular issue, because you were saying like our consumption kind of drove up from the 1950s. But like, you know, like I think sometimes trying to get figures across, and like it's estimated that it's between like 8 to 12 million tons per year are ending up in our marine environment. That's total marine litter. And, you know, it's historically, there's about 150 million tons of marine litter that are currently in place in our environment. So you can see that it is kind of coming out from like numerous different angles and that. And the one thing that, you know, the way you hear these figures like 100 million tons, or what does that mean? But it's estimated that it's about like every minute there's a dump truck of marine litter that it's ending up in our environment. But like, you know, you talked about society and consumption as well. And, you know, it's like you look back at Ireland, like, you know, two items that are quite commonplace now in Ireland that weren't 20 years ago. So one would be coffee cups and one would be water bottles. And like the EPA kind of like looks at this and say, we're like producing possibly 500,000 coffee cups a day, and about 220,000 water bottles. And these are items like, you know, 20 years ago, they weren't even commonplace. So you can see how society and like consumerism has kind of like created these new markets for plastic to kind of insert into. But there was one, like, I know a topic kind of very much after your own heart these days, sewage related literally. And would you like to kind of like let us kind of chat about the impacts of the sewage related litter?
Yeah, definitely. We're talking about relationships on Valentine's Day. Mine's with sewage related litter. That's what we talk about all the time in work. It's probably not a very hard thing to be talking about, but it's necessary. And when it comes to the bathroom, I think often what we actually, and it's the most important thing, I think, from both Clean Coast point of view and the Think Before You Flush campaign, is that everything is just about kind of making this positive behaviour change and not putting necessarily any shame on anybody about anything. And the one thing that we really find with the Think Before You Flush campaign is people just are unaware of what can and can't go down the toilet. And often this is the items that are putting in the toilet contain plastic. And as again, we've like discussed a huge amount there that these things just last for a super long time. So it's really hard once it's in the system to then kind of remove it, whether it's the ecosystem, whether it's our wastewater system. So essentially the rule is only pee, poo and paper goes down the toilet and everything else goes in the bin. So if you're looking at wipes or cotton wool, cotton buds, other items like people might throw down the toilet that people aren't aware of, is like cigarettes, do contain plastic and are highly toxic for the environment. There's one that, and again, this probably doesn't come under the plastic thing, but it's something that we actually make people aware of when we do talk about the campaign. So that hair actually can cause big problems in our wastewater network, because it can cause blockages with wipes, with cotton wool, with cotton buds. So we've all sure heard of the kind of fat birds that turn up. Basically, we're getting oil from the sink, which shouldn't go down there either, it should be disposed of in the bin. And that's mixing with wet wipes or other items in sewage-related litter, and it's causing huge blockages in our wastewater network. This then can lead to overflows, which means that the wastewater is then entering our natural environment, and with it, it's pulling wipes and it's pulling cotton buds into the sea. And only a very small portion of that is coming back onto the beach. And it's often what we see a lot when we go out with groups on cleanups. I'm sure, Richard, you've come across wet wipes and cotton buds a huge amount on your cleanups.
Yeah, loads. Like they're the two kind of common things that, especially in the Dublin region, like they kind of be knotted in the seaweed and that. So wet wipes and cotton bud sticks. There's like, anytime we do cleanups, like people are always like, why is there so many of these like blue straws and that? But unfortunately, they are a big issue. They are having an impact on the marine environment, and that's why it's so important to have the kind of Think Before You Flush campaign. But just like we were kind of chatting about the kind of very much anthropocenic kind of impacts of plastics and that, and we'd like to kind of put it through more to like what's actually happening on the environment. And, we just kind of briefly chat about that now. So, well, like when you look at like from kind of like a marine perspective, like they estimated that up to 1,500 marine species are impacted by the marine litter and marine plastics ended up in our environment. So this is everything from, like 44% of marine birds, all species of sea turtles, and like about 40% of our cetaceans. So they're like, whales or dolphins and porpoises. But it's so interesting, like when you start looking at the research, I find is like when different species are, affected differently. So like one from an Irish context is the fulmar bird. There was a study there done a couple of years ago from Ireland, and it looked at basically their impacts and ingestion of marine plastics, and it found that up to 90% of those particular species had ingested plastics, that these were like birds that had died and ended up on our coastline. But when you look at, I find that fascinating, and it is the scientists linked it back to how the actual particular bird feeds. So it's a surface level feeder, so that's why it would mistake the plastic items for actually food. And when you kind of broaden it out as well, as we were chatting about, like you were saying earlier, Leanne, it's like plastic is, it's a wonderful substance because it is durable and that, and it's replaced so many different particular items. But it's also like, it's cheap, durable, and lasts forever. That makes it wonderful, but also makes it, terrible because it's cheap, durable, and lasts forever. But it's when it's, we talk about plastic breaking down, but it's more so it kind of breaks up into smaller bits, and when these particular items are ending up in our food web. So you get, microplastics and nanoplastics, and they're making their way into the food web of the phytoplankton and zooplankton, and then making their way up the food web from there. And like I found it fascinating that that's actually, obviously our oceans play a critical role in our carbon cycle. And one particular study that I came across was looking at how when phytoplankton and zooplankton, when they ingest plastic, when they would pass, they would like sink to the bottom, and all carbon would be stored on the sea floor bed. But because they're plastics, they're actually they've consumed plastics, they're floating to the top, and from that is actually releasing kind of carbon dioxide. So you can see, because like everything with our environment, they're so interconnected, and there's so much kind of impacts that we do and we don't even know about that is happening as a result of plastics. Is there anything you'd like to jump in there on, Leanne?
like I think, and this is one of the things close to my heart is that often I think we kind of hear when we hear that plastics aren't great, but there's a huge amount of very successful research out there just to see what is the effect, and to keep ourselves like updated with the current thinkings on whatever it is waste management wise, and whether it's what's going in your toilet or it's what's going into your bins, because we produce so much of it in this world that we live in now. Just being aware, it can be like really good to know where your waste is going, and that sometimes can help us to just make decisions and make choices that would aid the environment as much as possible. When you were chatting about the birds there, and so just to bring it slightly further into that, it's the dimethyl sulfide or dinner bell is what I would like to call it, but it's basically that we have algae in the sea, and they are the first level of our web. So they're our primary resource in the sea. These microscopic algae is where our kind of small critters go. They eat that, it goes up and it works its way up to the food chain towards our bigger marine mammals, which would be like the seabirds and our whales and our dolphins. But the algae itself produces a chemical called dimethyl sulfide. So it smells essentially, and the algae will then draw the animals that eat it towards it, which are unfortunately fortunately for them, are the animals that seabirds will eat. And fortunately not for the animals that are dead, obviously. But the dimethyl sulfide releases the smell. So once a seabird can smell this, so many seabirds will use their nose to hunt for food. And when they smell this, they know that there will be their own prey there, so they will go towards it. The unfortunate thing is that plastic is amazing at taking on smell. So I don't know, you ever like left a curry in a tub too long in your fridge or something, you just can't get the smell out of it for ages, you're washing it soaking it for ages. This happens in the sea. When the plastic is in the sea and it takes on the smell of the algae, the birds then mistake it for its food, so they end up eating it. So they're a bit, it's not that they're necessarily, it's just happen chance that they're doing it. Unfortunately, the smell that is attached to the plastic is drawing the birds to it. So it's not necessarily that it just happens that the plastic is in the water and the bird just happens to have it. It's that it's actually taking on the smell of its prey. And it's why you're finding probably most birds at this stage will have some sort of, seabirds will have some sort of plastic in their systems. And with that as well, plastic is again really good at taking on stuff. And so it's actually quite good at being a toxin magnet. So when it's in the water, it can grab onto toxins such as like heavy metals or PCB, which was banned in the 70s, terrible for human health and the environment. Unfortunately, PCB is still in our oceans, even though it was banned in the 70s. So this gets taken on, and for many animals, it causes developmental issues. So yeah, once the toxins get inside, and then if you think about, the birds, the fish, or whatever it is, as we go through the food web, we're just accumulating more and more toxins in those animals. And unfortunately, we're on top of a food web as well. So those toxins are making their way back to us as well. Even taking out the terrible things that it's doing to the species in the ocean is doing some damage. And there's one also thing just to think about is, we talk about climate change. Often people disregard the plastics conversation when it comes to climate change. But the fact is that we are making so much plastics, and we are making so much waste at the moment. So if you think of even the production of plastics, which plastic comes from oil and gas, it can come from sustainable plant resources as well, but primarily it's from oil and gas. And so like if you flip that coin, there's one of our main problems with greenhouse gas. And flip it back, we have the production of it, so that's going to take energy. We then have the transport, we then have the disposal of it, the waste, the collection, and then whether it's being recycled or whether it's straight going into a landfill. So it's just something to be aware of, that yes, it's maybe not it's definitely not a primary cause of climate change. Like the product itself is not causing it, but the production of it, and because we are producing it in such huge numbers, it just is a very big issue. Yeah, so if we can do less, if we can, like, as we said at the start, you know, it's such a brilliant product. It is really magnificent and so useful. It has helped us to get to where we are as humans in technology, in food, in science, in medicine. But it's just about changing our direction with it. Can we use this product the way that it was built for, really, and kind of invented at the start to give us benefit and to help the environment at the same time. But yeah, so we're maybe go through a few of the questions we have for unless Richard, have you else put in before?
We'll go on to move on to some of the actions, is it, that people can take?
Yeah, some of the actions.
No. Yeah. Sorry, just the line dropped there for a second. It is. Yeah, it is fascinating because, as we were saying, it's like it's not the issue. It's that toxic relationship that we have with plastics and how we're using it is what is causing the big impacts. And you kind of link back into climate change, you know, with the ever growing kind of consumption of plastics. I think globally they were saying up to 10 to 15% of our global emissions could derive from the creation of plastic by 2050. So it is, unfortunately, unless things will turn, we're heading in the wrong direction. But as it's so kind of linking it back, we talked about the problem. So we're going to just quickly kind of chat about some of the actions that people can take, you know, to kind of lessen their impact and basically just look at their kind of plastic consumption. But what we'll do is we'll break it up into like an individual action and an individual action and kind of a group action, and people can take it at group stage and also at a national and international. So just kind of from our perspective, kind of like just from Clean Coast. So obviously in individual actions you can undertake the 2-minute beach clean. So that's kind of making a positive impact on your local environment. Next time you're down the beach, it's a bit of micro volunteerism. If you just spend 2 minutes picking up some rubbish, then like on your own level, like just as a consumer as well, you can, you know, it's all about the reusables. So can you swap any of the single-use plastic items for reusable? So reusable coffee cups, you know, cutlery, plates, you know, things like water bottles, you know, all these particular items that you can change and swap out. And what I always try to say is it's better to be the imperfect environmentalist and just trying to find actions that, you know, that are, you know, easy to kind of take and try not to get too guilty about it and that. And then when you kind of like link it back into like, you know, in our kitchens, you know, when possible, try and, if you can, shop in kind of zero waste shops, you know, use, eliminate kind of plastic wrapping from all your kind of fresh fruit and vegetables, if possible. You know, can you, use kind of like beeswax wraps and stuff like that? Or so there's loads of different kind of like nuggets in that. But just at an individual level, that people can take. But just from your own perspective, like Leanne, like as I said, like what would at an individual level could you take from the Think Before You Flush campaign? And also, we have some actions because it's Valentine's Day. I'd love you to kind of bring those up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with the Valentine's Day actions that we can do. So, like, again, we really want to make sure that, you know, we're talking about this. Like plastics, again, they are useful for so many things. But start thinking: can we eliminate the excess? Can we reduce the use, and can we reuse as much as possible? So if you're thinking about giving your loved one, or even if it's just your mate or whatever it is, if you're just showing your love to somebody today with flowers, maybe you go into the flower shop and you can ask that maybe it is not wrapped in plastic, or even if there's like a kind of muslin or something that you can put around it that it can then be reused. And for wrapping a present, like a piece of fabric, really great to use this type of myself. It's brilliant to be like, give it to the person, and then you just ask them, you're like, are you going to use that again? Or, because I'll take it back. And then you can just take it back, or you can give it to them and pay it forward, and then hopefully they'll start doing it as well. If we're looking for, you know, if you're giving a gift of some chocolates or whatever it is, that if it's something that you could even make yourself, and then you could wrap it yourself, would be great. yeah, so just to give a present to your loved one today, again, whoever that is, to just give a present to the environment as well would be a great thing to do. From the point of view of Think Before You Flush campaign, in our toilets, again, just to remind us that only pee from a paper will stay in the toilet, everything else goes in the bin. If you want to take it a step, obviously having maybe both bins, you have a general waste bin and a recycling bin, so we are ensuring that we are putting into the recycling as well. And then, but like if you want to take it a step further, we want to start looking at some of the products we use. There's some really simple swaps that you can do. So a bar of soap instead of a tub of soap. If you particularly like having the liquid soap, perhaps even replacing your plastic container with a glass one, or even if it was a plastic one, that's all you could find. Though that you can continuously reuse over the next 30, 40 years, that's perfectly fine to do as well. But it's thinking about how can I use something that I can use for a much longer period. And like razors as well, you can get safety razors, which will not be made of plastic. And you could maybe move to a more like reusable toothbrush or a bamboo toothbrush. But again, like making small steps, and it's making consumer decisions as us as a group, making choices that will then, I suppose, lead the businesses that are supplying us with things, lead them to maybe make decisions around they wrap in plastic and what they don't need to wrap in plastic.
Perfect. Yeah, there's like loads of little tips there. So that they're like loads of kind of actions, as I said, like from an individual perspective. So when we kind of bring it back out to a kind of like a group level or a community level, one thing, this is what kind of bread and butter work of Clean Coast, and it is very much what we do. We work with community groups, and what we try to get them to do is kind of like empower them and get them to adopt an area of coastline, and that's kind of a real kind of powerful action that people can do at a local level to kind of like lessen the impacts of plastics and show a bit of love to their back to their marine environment. So like nationally, we've groups dotted all around the coastline, and they're always looking for new volunteers to get involved. And there's even some new areas that need to be adopted as well. So please do. That's something from a group level that people can do to kind of get involved with Clean Coast and basically have actions with a kind of community level and that. And like a lot of those groups, when they kind of build a bit of capacity to kind of get more involved with the local authorities to kind of do things like, work with the local authorities on beach management practices or improving kind of beach infrastructure. That's something that I've worked closely with some of the kind of groups and local authorities over the last number of years. But, something as well, sorry, Leanne, is the Think Before You Flush communities, and that has that's something that another kind of aspect that people can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, individually taking your own action, but then sharing that word is so important. We found that a lot of people aren't aware of what should not go down the toilet. So yeah, like if you can spread the word in your community, we have a ton of resources online at thinkbeforeyouFlush.org that are free for download. If you need anything else, so like we're putting up posters in community hall, especially in bathrooms. You find the back of the bathroom wall when you're sitting down to do your business, so that you can have a read of that as well. It's a great place to put them. But just it's about spreading that word as much as possible, because once these plastic things, if they enter the wastewater network, it will become a problem, and it will cause an issue within whatever, wherever you are in Ireland. It's going to cause an issue within that area. We're going to get blockages, and whether it's even in your own home, it could happen, but then it could happen further down in the wastewater network, and then it even can happen in the wastewater treatment plants as well. So so just any items we're talking about with plastic. You've got your wipes, your cotton buds, your cotton wool, and if we can just put them in the bin, first of all, happy days. If we can then look at recycling them, even happier days. And then if we are getting a product with a longer life, absolutely amazing.
Perfect. That's it is like there's, as I said, there's so many different kind of actions at even a community level that can take. And then when you like, it's so interesting because like our work is very much like myself and Leanne's work is very much kind of like downstream issues. So, or sorry, downstream solutions. So what we are doing is at very much at a community level or a local level and that. But there's like other organisations, there's other kind of kind of projects happening and kind of upstream, like on the legislative perspective as well. So when it comes to kind of issues with plastics, like from a European perspective, we had in the last number of years we got the single-use plastics directives, and what that done is that has banned particular plastic items in certain, like things like, you know, cutlery, forks, knives, spoons, you know, plates, straws. It's banned these particular plastic items and removing them from the market and replacing them with compostable or biodegradable items as well. There's a number of different elements to it as well. It has like compulsory marketing on like plastic products. So I don't know, in the last while you might have noticed that if you have a coffee cup and if it contains plastics, it'll have a little kind of mark on it saying that there's plastic fibers or there's plastic in it. So that's another thing coming from a top-down level. And it's also what the actual directive also includes is this thing called extender producer responsibility. So kind of like the directive kind of introduces the kind of the whole polluter pays principle. So basically it kind of what it tries to do is like it trying to put bad responsibilities on these producers of these particular items on concerning things like waste management and collection of the products when they're littered, or even things about like funding kind of awareness raising campaigns around their impacts as well. So that's really good to see those kind of, that's coming from a European level. Then like in an Irish level as well, we've seen things like the deposit return scheme that's coming in at Q3 this year, and that's going to have a big impact. Now it's not just plastic bottles, it's also going to be cans as well, and that's going to put a tax on it, a tax on a can. So before, if you had bought a can, you know, normally would have cost €1, but now it's going to cost $1.20. And what happens when you bring it back, you'll be able to bring it to a vending machine and you'll get the 20 cents back. So that's going to basically increase the amount of recycling of these particular items as well, but also like it'll help eliminate the kind of leakage of these particular items. And then like when you kind of bring it out to kind of a global scale as well, what we're going to do is like there's kind of like movements towards possibly trying to get like a tax on virgin plastic. So that would be really big on kind of like to kind of incentivize recycling or making recycling more profitable as well, or making it more kind of like economically viable as well if there was a tax on virgin plastics. And then also like there's talk, or you know, like a lot of environmental NGOs are moving towards to see if we can get, you know, a cap on plastics. So basically like start reducing the amount of plastics, similar to what we've done trying to do in relation to our emissions. So have it capped and then kind of bring it down. So that will obviously, you know, incentivize kind of recycling, but also basically it will help with the leakage rates and that. And you know, these are like number of different things kind of coming from a kind of like an upstream solutions and kind of like on a policy level. But like, yeah, it is kind of like, and that's why we always try to kind of divide it out between like the, you know, the individual kind of community and then at the kind of like the policy national level and that. So before we kind of wrap up, Leanne, is there anything else you want to add, or do we have any kind of questions that come in there? Have you seen?
Yeah, well, we have one question here. I'll do my final piece. So, what do we have? We have a question about what do we think needs to be done around ocean plastic. So I'll jump in. But the issue, if we're talking directly about the ocean, the plastics that are in the ocean, it is hard to remove. It's, you know, they are, as Richard was saying, a lot of them on the seabed are getting stirred through storms. A lot of them are because of the water column. You know, throughout the water column in the ocean, you have multiple species living in multiple levels of the water column. It's difficult to remove these once they're in situ. What needs to happen in the future is that we need to reduce our reliance, I think, on excess plastic. You know, the stuff that we are, and the single use. And if we are going to use these things, it is to correctly dispose of them. If it is to be recycled, recycle it. In 2019, the EPA did a waste management report, and they found that only a third of the items recycled. So yeah, like if you're throw stuff in the right bin now, let's look at trying to reduce our reliance on that excess plastic or plastic is happening at a higher level, which is where it needs to happen. But those decisions to change don't come from just the higher level. They come from what is being said on the ground and what's being said from consumers, whether it's people buying stuff, whether it's decisions from social groups, whatever it is, people working hard. Like there's some people working hard to get these things changed, but it does have support from regular folks just making different choices. And just before I hand it over to you, Richard, it's got a good one. Like plastics, I think you can only once or twice. And then it can't be used anymore. For paper, it is, I think, 5 to 7 times. For glass, it's infinite. For aluminium cans or metals, it is also infinite. So even that we do around what we buy, even a convenience like in a can is perhaps a better decision. But I want to give a go at that question. So what do we need to do to around ocean plastics?
Yeah, no, that's thanks, Leanne. And it is interesting. Like even if we turned off the tap tomorrow, with ocean plastics and that, we would still be, undertaking kind of cleanups for the next possibly 15, 20, 30 years. I remember I was speaking earlier on about retro rubbish and that. So it is going to be things like incentivise community cleanups and that globally, like on a large global scale. That's going to help kind of get this plastic back off our marine environment when it kind of washes up. But then there's obviously there's a lot of kind of developments in technology around kind of we've seen the Oceans Cleanup Project as well, that they're trying to kind of see if they can clean up the gyros in the Pacific Ocean as well. So it'll be a mixture of kind of coming at it from its numerous different angles. There's going to be no silver bullet to this particular issue. So everything be from at a local level community cleanups to technology to possibly you could be even using things like the fishing industry to try and remove plastics. Like if the funding was used there. So there's no that particular issue, like all environmental issues, there's going to be no silver bullet to kind of to alleviate it, and it's going to take a bit of time and coming at it from a number of different angles, unless some magical technology is invented in the next couple of years or that. But perfect. So, guys, we're heading over. We're heading over now. Nearly 1:10. So what we do is we might just wrap it up there. And look, we'd like to thank everyone for coming and happy Valentine's Day. And I hope we probably hopefully give you some nuggets to show a bit of love to our oceans and marine environment. And is there anything else you'd like to say, Leanne, there before we wrap up?
No, just if anyone is looking for any extra information, you can head over to 18coast.org and head over to thinkfush.org. You can learn more about the campaigns and how you can get involved and how you can help. And our social media, it's great. The month of February, we have been offering, or we've been sharing some swaps you can do for plastic items, for reusable items. And you can head. Go check out everything. Go look at all the stuff if you've an interest in it. And if you need anything else, you can always reach out. So from both those websites, you can reach out to our team. And if you set up a clean coast for yourself or join one, do a 2-minute beach clean. If you would like your community to consider the Think Before You community and get some projects done there, please do get in contact.
Perfect. So, okay, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. And look, thanks a million for joining us. And we hope you have a lovely Valentine's Day. Okay, Slán.